I have not talked to one single person in the last year that drives and hasn't complained about headlights being too bright. Now, first, I know this might seem like a weird thing to be discussing. Like, you know, who cares? I think is a very quick response to have to this, right? But isn't it interesting that when everybody notices something and they hate it so much, nothing changes? Like, everybody I know doesn't like this. And I'm guessing if you clicked on this video, you've probably seen these too, right? Headlights are getting brighter and brighter, and nobody likes it. But even past that, lights in general have been getting like way more annoying. Have you ever noticed how like there's no more yellow lighting anywhere? It's all this really bright white lighting. I know for me personally, in one of my rooms, I at some point had to get white lighting because of videos, right? I wanted white lights so I could have better for videos, right? Better lighting for videos. And it was terrible. It was the worst thing ever. It's not pleasant to have bright white lights on you at all times. But why are they everywhere then? Why is everything with bright white lighting, right? And I think that when people are complaining about something like this, it's a very like normal thing to be like, oh, who cares? Like you gotta, you know, don't sweat the small stuff, is I think what somebody could very easily say. But there is proof that these things are not meaningless at all, right? They're totally not meaningless, especially when they're everywhere. Yeah, you walk into one room with bright white lights, or you get flashed by some bright headlights when you're driving. Like, that's not the end of the world. We all know that. Nobody's saying that this is that big of a problem, but there are real impacts, especially when this is everywhere. You know, it's not one room. A great example of why this is, I think, a good encapsulation of why this is so interesting is because of a very famous phenomenon that where retail stores will use bright white lights and loud music to try to overstimulate their shoppers, so they're more likely to buy more. This is something that people have been doing since like the 80s, I think. And it's interesting, right? That's if we're to say, and I'm sure this isn't 100% true, but if we're to make the generalization that retail stores are the first place these started popping up, why would they be everywhere? Like, why do we start putting them everywhere? You know, there's no argument that every single place wants to overwhelm you, right? So why? Another great example, this is why do we have bright headlights when they're distracting all of the drivers, right? There's so many cases where it's like, why is that happening when everybody dislikes it and there's no real reason for it? Of course, there are some real reasons as to why these lights are being used, right? Bright white LEDs are actually much cheaper to function than the other types of lights that are more pleasant, that everybody likes way more, right? There are real reasons behind this. However, still not great, right? And I think when you ask a question like, okay, why does everybody care about this though? You can look at very small but meaningful impacts that come from something like this, right? And I promise this video is not just going to be me discussing bright white lights. There is a point to all this as we get to the end of this, right? Studies have shown not only that bright white lights overwhelm you all the time, but that also, long term, they can lead to a worse mental state. They can lead to sleep deprivation, right? And I would go as far as saying that if we had something that was perhaps, let's say, very profitable, but also had very reliable studies, that thing that was very profitable would lead to, not good impacts on one's psyche or one's overall health, we would stop doing that, right? That's what makes sense. Cigarettes, great example of this. You know, we're like, cigarettes are bad. Now it's like $20 to buy a pack of cigarettes, right? Even though if you go anywhere else on earth, it's like $2, right? So why is it that this hasn't been stopped? Well, I don't know. I really have no idea, right? But the fact of the matter is that I think I find this situation in particular be a very small encapsulation of a much larger issue and a great way to look at like how problems in the world manifest, in my opinion, right? For example, this is one small thing that leads to a lot of big things, but people being overall tired or like having a bad mental state, that's a big thing long term. If everybody on Earth, that's a crazy exaggeration. If you get 100 people in a room and the lights make it so all of them are 1% less there cognitively, you know, whether that be they're a little agitated or they just can't focus all the way, that's the 100% less, less good thinking that's going on in that room. It's true. I mean, these things do add up. Now, I think that I find this so interesting because I think it's a pretty good encapsulation of how society's problems tend to manifest, right? Like overall large-scale problems. Usually it's one small thing that has large impacts that, when combined with a bunch of other small things, lead to an overall issue forming, right? Now, I think that this is interesting because it's almost an alternative view to look at things, right? Instead of, oftentimes, if you look at, turn on the news, right? It's very easy for people to find a boogeyman to blame all their problems on, right? Whether that boogeyman be a person, a phenomenon, a country, a system, like all of these things will occur, right? And there's a lot of validity to a lot of these arguments, let me emphasize, right? But I think there's an alternative view where we rid ourselves of these meta-narratives, and instead of having one major boogeyman in this regard, we reevaluate society's problems as a disconnected group of issues that are all leading to these problems 1% at a time, right? Now, I do think there's also another view to how you could view something like this, right? Using these bright headlights as sort of a vessel. We talked about many reasons why these headlights remain bright, despite nobody liking it, right? You could look into these reasons, trace them all back, and see how many other issues get traced back to the same reasons. Profitability is a big one, right? You constantly are tracing every issue back to profitability. You might go, the profit motive is causing a ton of problems, and that's not an uncommon stance to have. That's not a bad position to have. There's certainly a lot of evidence for it, right? So I think when investigating things as to why we believe things are bad or less than satisfactory to where they once were, I do think that there's two approaches to take. One, where you take a small issue and you use it to debunk meta-narratives. You go, see, this one small issue is leading to all these big things. There's no one boogeyman as to why things suck. It's 2,000 little things that are adding up, right? Or there's the other route you could go, where instead of doing that, you go, see, there's all these small issues that lead back to the same bigger issue. Of course, I'm not going to answer that question here in this video as to, what the answer to that is. There is no answer to that, largely, right? I mean, I'd be completely and utterly lying and defrauding you all if I said I could answer, if there's one large issue to all society's problems, or if they're all smaller issues in this video. That's not at all going to happen. But I think it's something we should be thinking about. I think it's an important topic that doesn't get enough coverage because, well, honestly, it's easier to, and I think, like, if you look at the way that a lot of news functions, it's very easy, it's quick to realize, it's just like a lot more simple to be like, oh, there's this going on, now there's this going on, now there's this going on, and never actually teach people how to think about things than it is to, like, sit down and be like, okay, well, this kind of seems similar to that, and this seems similar to that. Like, all these things I do think are interconnected to an extent. Not to sound like a major conspiracy theorist or anything, but I don't know, I just think it's something important to think about. I think it's a conversation that should be started. This is today's painting. It's a pepper. So I was like, there's no other red fruits outside of an apple, and I should have opened up to the vegetables category. Somebody commented, though, thank you to you, that peppers, cherries, and tomatoes are all also red. They said plums too. I'm gonna have to challenge you on that one. I'm gonna let it slide because you gave me 3 other things to paint. So I'm not gonna do too much there, but come on, man. There's literally a color named plum, and that's what the color of plum is. It's like being like oranges are red. Like, they're literally named orange. Sorry, I don't want to be rude to you at all, but that's just like something that's, that was a little crazy to say, I think. We'll have a one-on-one one day. No, I'm joking, but go check us out on the TikTok and the Instagram. Until next time, guys, gals, and pals, my name is Max Dice. This is Paint Talk episode 317. I'm here every morning, painting and talking with you all.